Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is the owner of Troponin Nutrition. Today's guest is Justin Harris. Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
For sure. So Justin, I just like to kind of start this podcast off with a couple of questions for my guests. The first one that I have for you is who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders or fitness athletes of all time?
Of all time, I would probably start out with Bill Kazmaier. That's kind of what got me interested in the whole thing. Seeing him, I can't even remember because by the time I was seeing him on World's Strongest Man on the old ones, that was like ESPN2 when I was older. Somehow I saw him, I don't know if it was a Powerlifting USA magazine, something like that, probably, early teens. And that was kind of what really fueled my interest. And so my interest since then has always been kind of this combination of bodybuilding and powerlifting. As far as pure bodybuilding, it would have to be Jay Cutler, primarily because of his business approach to bodybuilding, which I think is phenomenal. Which is something I think one of the more frustrating things for me in the sport is that you have all these people with all this self-motivation and the ability to be dedicated and work hard, who never seem to apply it to other avenues of their life, like an Arnold or a Jay would. And so I really respect what he's built from bodybuilding outside of bodybuilding.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and I would love to kind of touch on the business side of things here once we kind of get a little bit further in our conversation. So the second question here, just to kind of kick the podcast conversation off. At what age did you start lifting weights? And then what was kind of the impetus or the reasoning, the why behind that starting lifting?
I got my first weight set when I was 8 or 9. I remember watching, and I think it was probably that 1989 or 88. It must have been 1989. Yeah, that first one, Arnold Classic. I think it was on like NBC, and I was, a kid. And I was just mesmerized by it. Never see, as a kid in the 80s, everyone loved, Arnold and, Rambo and Rocky. And so you loved all those things. But seeing that at the real extreme level, I was just mesmerized. And I remember going to bed that night, 9 years old, and trying to draw what the bodybuilders looked like and just thinking it was the coolest thing. And so I asked for a weight set for Christmas that year. I got a bench and some plastic weights. By the time I was 12 or 13, I had a lat pull down and a squat rack. And then, you're a kid. It's not like I was going down in the basement 5 days a week. It was every once in a while when my buddies would try to max out or something. But I think age 15, I joined a real gym. And I remember because my mom had to drive me. I couldn't drive yet. She would take me on the way to work before school, and I'd work out really fast and then run to school, which is a mile away. And from then on, it's been, 4, 5, 6 days a week, every single week since then.
Awesome. So I kind of want to just transition a little bit and touch a little bit more on kind of your backstory. So if you don't mind sharing with myself and the listeners, Justin, where did you grow up? Did you play sports? Kind of what did those younger years look like? And then we'll transition up to high school, and then we'll kind of get into college and go from there.
I grew up in Michigan, just north of Detroit. And if you've ever been to Michigan, people always show it as, it looks like a mitten. I grew up in the thumb. Sports for my whole life growing up. My whole life. Early on, it was baseball. All through my childhood years, I was absolutely convinced my career was going to be in the major leagues. And then sports through everything, and 3 sports in high school, football, wrestling, baseball. I was a good athlete. I was a good athlete my whole life, but puberty kind of hit me a little late. And then it hit me between my junior and senior years. And then I became a really good athlete. So, I was captain of the football team, captain of the baseball team at my high school. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's unfortunate anymore, but because of my late blooming, I had some baseball offers, but I didn't really have any football offers, which was my real passion. I ended up playing Division III football, where I did well. I was a 2-time All-American at a school called Alma College in Michigan, and just had an absolute blast. And then from there, I went to the NFL combines, not the ones that are on ESPN, herd cattle through combines. I did really well though. I went through some private tryouts for some arena teams. I can't remember. It's hard to remember. It's 20 years ago now. I think at the combines, I did 41 reps with 225, which I'm pretty sure was the high at the 2001 combines. I had a 36.5-inch vertical. Basically, I met all the basic criteria to be professional level. The problem was, as I played defensive end, and I'm 5'10", so my speed was good. I ran a 4.68, 36.5 vertical. My strength was good. My shuttle run was like 3.1. Like my shuttle run was very, very good. I was really quick. So they had me try some, I did play short yardage fullback in college a little bit. Actually, some of the footballs are behind me. I think I had like 6 touchdowns, but it was basically we'd get on the goal line and they just throw me in and I'd close my eyes and run as fast as I could. But they had me run some routes and do some things at fullback. But at the end of the day, it ended up being there were 10,000 other guys who were 5'10" with decent speed who had also played football or fullback their whole life. So nothing came of that. And then that's kind of what got me into bodybuilding, because I was my whole life, you're competing, you're doing stuff, and then suddenly there was nothing, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I don't think I was always interested in bodybuilding, but I was always more powerlifting focused. But for whatever reason, that's kind of what started me in bodybuilding. I wanted to get in shape, stop looking like a football player, got really into nutrition.
Now, before we start kind of transitioning in that, I do want to ask you, because a lot of us grew up playing sports. Was there anybody, and now you're coaching bodybuilders and different athletes, but was there a coach, maybe it was a college coach or a high school coach, during that time you were playing the organized sports? Was there a coach, Justin, that kind of comes to mind that did have a pretty impactful, you had a pretty impactful experience with that coach during those sports seasons, or not?
Unfortunately, I'm not really that coachable. I'm pretty stubborn, and if I don't agree, and I didn't realize it at the time, and I wish I could go back and change it, but I still am this way. If someone tells me to do something, if it hasn't made logical sense that that's the right thing to do, I just won't do it. And I wish I was better at expressing that to coaches when I was younger, because it would probably save me some headaches. There actually is a coach named Jeff Davis, who was a football and baseball coach in high school. He wasn't a head coach, but he was a guy who was into lifting weights. And this is the magazines were out, but there's no internet or anything. People don't realize now how hard it was to get information. The kids today are so spoiled. We used to wait, like Powerlifting USA would come out like 4 times a year, and you'd go to GNC every day for weeks, just to find a workout routine, because no one knew anything. You couldn't go out, you couldn't even go to the library and find books on training. You go to the library and you'd find some 1950s, Eastern Bloc thing where it was all focused on, on Olympic weightlifting. You couldn't find anything. But there was a guy, Jeff Davis, and I never met his brother, but his brother, Terry Davis, I think actually did compete in bodybuilding possibly, but Jeff was my coach. And so he was kind of not like he was like kind of the closest thing I knew to a bodybuilder. And so, he worked out with me and my buddy at the time, Mike Hickey, was my training partner for years. And this is how clueless we were about anything. People worry about overtraining now. We used to, because Jeff would run in the morning at like 5 a.m. So Mike and I would get up and we'd run 5 miles at 5 a.m. Then we'd go, I think we'd even like stop by, because there was like a fitness center right next to the high school. I think we'd stop by and do something, some weights, and then we'd go to school, and then we'd go to football or baseball practice. And then after practice, we'd go back to the gym and lift again. It was like 3 workouts a day. It's just so incredibly overtrained. And didn't know, but when you're young and excited. But he was probably the closest, as far as the only person I knew who, because at this time, even back then, some of the older coaches would still be against weightlifting. We would kind of have to do it. This is crazy, because this is the mid 90s. But if your coach is 68 years old and he'd been around forever at that time, there was still some of that old muscle bound thought, especially in baseball. My coaches in baseball would actually, as I started gaining weight, they'd start bringing in pinch runners for me, because they thought because I was gaining weight, I had to be slow. And so to change that, I actually had to race the kid that they were putting in for, as a pinch, to prove that just because I weigh more now doesn't mean I'm slower. So he was probably the only one who actually was, encouraged the weightlifting and stuff.
Right. And there's something, I'm a little bit younger than you, but like, I grew up, I was born in 87. So kind of grew up in the magazine era. And you just kind of brought up, all this information that we have nowadays, kind of like information overload, and talking about, hey, you're at one point, you're doing like 3 workouts a day and you didn't really know any better. But don't you think, Justin, there's something, I don't know if you want to say pure about that, but isn't there something just kind of like, about that, where it kind of like instills that work ethic in you, which you can have all the information in the world, but if you don't have the work ethic, like it doesn't mean anything. So don't you think kind of those years, kind of some of that, less information years, don't you think it was almost better? And maybe some of the kids and some of us nowadays would benefit from just kind of like, hey, you know what, why don't you just learn how to work hard, learn the discipline, and then kind of go from there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think the internet's a perfect example. It's like the old saying, like, someday everyone's going to have access to information, and there's maybe no more idiots in the world. We have access to all the information that's ever existed, and there's more idiots than ever. No, I couldn't agree with that more. It was because you're so spoiled today. I don't think you really. And I say me too, because when I'm learning a new thing, I get all that information that quickly too. And it's there's something different between figuring something out and working for it, and like, because there's that excitement about trying, getting little. I remember, like, when a movie would come out, someone would hear that a guy had muscles in the movie, and we would rent the movie at Blockbuster or whatever, just and we would try to find anything. Maybe we could see something in the background, like a book he's reading that might have to do with bodybuilding, or maybe there's a weight in the corner. We knew nothing. And I'll give an example of a different area that I think kind of showcases it. I play the guitar. I don't really play anymore, but for a while I was kind of obsessed with the guitar also. You can go out, you don't have to read music. You can go online, get guitar tabs for any song ever made. And in 10 minutes, you can see how the song's been made. But if you look at all like the really great guitarists, none of them, they're all self-taught. None of them can read music. And the way they learned is they would listen to songs on the radio and work through until they could play it from scratch, and there's something better about that, that it's a longer, developmental process. But when you work yourself through all the errors, you figure out all the mistakes, by the time you understand something, you absolutely understand it inside and out. And it's no longer you are playing the guitar, it's like you own it. And I think the same thing a lot with bodybuilding. And I think you really see it now. And I think that's probably one of the bigger reasons why people always talk about bodybuilding peaking, in the kind of late 90s, kind of the pre-internet era, because now it's so easy. How to become a bodybuilder. You type it online, and there's an infinite number of pages with everything. We're back, like I said, even in my days, we'd hang out at GNC. We'd go to the mall every single time we were at the mall. We'd walk by GNC to see if there was a new magazine, anything. And then you'd scour, trying to find any little bit of tidbit of anything. And you'd go through so much trial and error. By the time you finally latched onto something that worked, it was with you for life. You knew it inside and out. Where now, there's so much, you can only retain so much information. You can read a book on everything to do with bodybuilding, and great, you've read everything to do with bodybuilding. It doesn't mean you understand or you've kept any of it.
Well spoken. I couldn't agree more. Now, I want to touch on college a little bit, because I know that you went to college, you're educated and everything. And so why don't you just touch on kind of like what you studied, and just talk a little bit about college, your experience, and then we'll kind of just dive straight into bodybuilding and coaching.
Yeah, I'm the least efficient collegiate student on earth. I think I have 10 or 11 years of college in total. I started out, I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do. I went to Elman because they were going to let me play football, and then I kind of figured out what I'd study afterwards. And so I remember talking to my guidance counselor, not really knowing what I wanted to study. And they ask you what you like, and I'm like, well, I like sports and lifting weights and science. And they were like, well, do exercise science. It's perfect, And exercise science was great, and it probably helps me a ton still to this day with my coaching business and stuff. But that exercise science is great if you go on to a grad school with it. There's not much you can do with exercise science. Be an exercise physiologist, which is a great field, but it's there's a pretty hard ceiling to how far you can climb in that field. So exercise science, kinesiology was my first degree. I started taking graduate courses at Valparaiso University. Briefly after that, decided I didn't want to. I took some psychology courses at Drexler. And then eventually I went back years later for math and physics. And so I have over 100 credits in each math and physics in undergrad, but I don't have an undergraduate degree in either of them. But I got into a physics PhD program at Western Michigan University, and I completed all the coursework and even took the qualifying exams, but I didn't complete the PhD. I loved physics, and I still do, and I still every once in a while, I absolutely love physics. It like helps me. I can't even explain how much. There's nothing I come across anymore where I don't have a decent baseline understanding of. Any field. You go investing, you go real estate. Anything that has any quantitative action at all. If you understand physics, you kind of have a decent baseline. But I realized a few years in that I'm not dumb, but there's some really smart people out there. There are two students in particular, a guy named Dighton and a girl named Caitlin, who just you realize they just think a level deeper than you do. And so I got a couple years in, I was working on my PhD research on electron capture. So we were working on a particle accelerator. We would shoot highly ionized particles at atomic or molecular targets. And when they capture electrons, they happen at certain energy levels, and they only can happen at certain quantized energy levels, and that's basically quantum mechanics. And one day my advisor kind of patted me on the back to show me how much my progress was. He's like, you're doing really good. You'd have enough for a master's thesis. He kind of, saying like, look, you're almost there. Where I took that as, oh, master's thesis. And so literally that week I went to the registrar and applied for my master's and finished the thesis, published it, and left. And then never worked in physics.
Cool. Now, the first time that I came across you, this would have been probably 2006, 2007 through YouTube. And YouTube was just, in the infant stages. I was in college. I was, reading all the muscular development magazines. And then when a college professor, my freshman year in college, said something about YouTube, and I was like, I got to check this out. We had MySpace and different things like that at the time. So I checked that out. I started typing in like Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler. Some way, somehow I came across you and Steve Kuclo and some of those very early videos that you guys had in terms of training sessions, just hardcore, old school, just moving a lot of weight. So that's been, I was a freshman in college back in 2006. So that's been a long time ago. So just touch on maybe how you got connected with Steve, and then just talk about the evolution of your training. I know you've done the powerlifting, you've done the bodybuilding, you've kind of combined the two. So just kind of unpack all of that. So how did you get connected with Steve? And then just kind of the transformation from there.
Those videos were kind of a glimpse into what things were, because it was obviously internet age, but not quite social media, everyone's connected age. Back then, you didn't know other powerlifters or bodybuilders, so you didn't know if you were doing was heavy or not, and so like Steve and I, we had no idea the weights until YouTube. Really, you had no comparison. You could read in a magazine what the world record squat was, but back then with geared lifting and stuff, you'd see a 1,000-pound squat, you assume they were doing it raw. You didn't know any difference, so you had no gauge. And so that was kind of interesting, because that was when that was the first time I realized that like the weights we were lifting were better than most, I guess. And so that's kind of where I met some power lifters to that. But the way I met Steve is really interesting, is that I think he went to the Arnold Classic, which is about 3-4 hours south of where we lived at the time, and he met someone who knew me, and he was interested in bodybuilding, wanted to learn more about it. This is some kid playing high school hockey, and I don't even think he had a gym membership. Anyway, someone gets him in touch with me. He comes over to, we were living in an apartment at the time. He comes over with this printout from bodybuilding.com, and this kid walks in, 17 years old, 220 pounds, lean, looks like he's been, on his 4th competition. He walks in and he tells me he wants to learn about bodybuilding. And he's like, I got this from bodybuilding.com. It says you're supposed to eat chicken. And I'm like, this kid could win the Mr. Michigan tomorrow, and he doesn't even know about protein, and his workouts are what they did with the hockey team, So So I knew right then, I mean, it was a cool and sort of sad moment because at that point, my focus, I wanted to be a bodybuilder, pro bodybuilder. And it was kind of a hard reality. You learn, I don't have bad genetics, but you learn the different genetic levels there. When this 17-year-old kid walks in at 220 lean, it doesn't even, not even working out. But we didn't start working out together right away, actually. I coached him and he might have won both. He won 2 team nationals, the heavyweight class. I can't remember if we were even working out together between, probably by the second one we were. But that, I mean, another you know, the naivety of back then, pre-internet, he didn't know anything about contest prep or dieting. And so when we're dieting down, he didn't know you were supposed to get weaker or feel tired because he had never read that. And so, you know, I'm dieting, we're dieting together. I'm expecting it to get weaker and tired, and he's not, he's still getting stronger. And so that was kind of an interesting foray into like what the mind can really do. Because I was like, well, shit, how much of this is just me accepting that I'm getting weaker? He doesn't know that, he's still getting stronger. And so it ended up being like, it actually probably ruined my bodybuilding career, to be honest, because he was such a phenomenal training partner. And, you know, if you know Steve, he comes into the gym with his hair gelled, you know, matching clothes, you know, all primed and proper, but then like, he's got this, it's not even like a second gear. It's like he doesn't know better. You can put him under anything and he just does it and goes as hard as anyone has ever gone. And, you know, and he's like giggling. It's a really interesting thing, but it was several years of just 100% on point, phenomenal workouts no matter, and he was just never not motivated, never not fired up. And if by ever chance he happened to be, you know, I would be motivated. And so it was just, we fed off each other and just had phenomenal lifts for, you know, 3-4 years together. And like I said, it, you know, probably ruined my bodybuilding career because he moved to Texas and then I had to go back to training by myself. And it was, you realize that, you know, how much he actually brought to the table. And it was hard to get back to that same level of intensity without him being there.
For sure. So touch on just quickly here, Justin, like your own kind of like bodybuilding career, like maybe just touch on maybe a highlight and kind of just what actually competing taught you.
Well, the highlight would have been probably winning the Mr. Michigan. That was just, you know, it's the only first and only time I did it. And, you know, I didn't really know. It was my first round of competitions. I did the Capital City Classic and the Mr. Michigan kind of, you know, back to back. And I had no idea. I mean, I knew what bodybuilders were supposed to look like, but you don't know what your ability level's at. And so to win that and win the overall, that was really exciting. So I won that, and then I did that was 2004. 2005, I got my butt kicked at the Junior Nationals, and that's when I learned, you know, what national level competition was. I came back in 2006 and won the Junior USA's as a super heavyweight then. And that was probably my best look. The next year should have been, but the 2007 USA's, that was when Steve moved halfway through prep. And by then I had 2 kids and I was working a couple different jobs. And that was the other thing. I had always worked like multiple jobs while I was competing. And so it was always really difficult. And by then my coaching business was taking off also. And it was starting to kind of be obvious that I was going to be a better coach. My abilities as a coach were going to be better than my abilities as a bodybuilder. You know, like they say, those who can't do, teach or coach. And so I was kind of already seeing that. And I could have, I mean, I feel like I could have turned professional, but 2007 was my last real push for it. I kind of lost the focus even towards the end of that prep and then never really gained it back.
Right. Awesome. So let's touch on coaching, because that's, you know, really, I think now what you're known for and great at. So I wanna talk about just kind of like the nuts and bolts of coaching. Again, going back to social media, we get on Instagram. There's all these different self-proclaimed coaches, but from your estimation, in terms of bodybuilding, what makes somebody a great coach?
Well, I don't know if it's sadly or what the word is, but only about half of it is actually probably nutritional knowledge or coaching knowledge. There's a lot more to it than just knowing. I mean, otherwise every PhD in nutrition or training would be a phenomenal coach. There's obviously that. For bodybuilding especially, there's the eye. You have to, you know, like when you see, you know, every competition, you know, you go on Facebook or anywhere on the internet and people are complaining about the placings. But if you talk to most coaches would have, I mean, there's very, very, very rarely, especially at the professional level or pro qualifying level, where I don't have the top 5 exactly as it's placed. And I don't have them, I mean, within a few seconds of being on stage. I mean, it's incredibly obvious. And there's a couple of ones where you're not, but almost always they get the winner correct. When I say correct, meaning whatever this judging criteria is, the coaches see it the same as the judges. And so in the crowd or the fans, they'll always see something different. They can't believe this person didn't win. And I don't know, because it's not something you can really quantify even, it's not like you could write a computer algorithm to probably define it, but whatever it is, you need to have that eye. And whether it's the correct eye or it just happens to be the eye that the judges have, you do need to have that. If you don't have it, it doesn't matter how much your knowledge as far as nutrition and training and supplements are, you're not going to get people ready. The other thing is, they always say working in the service industry is the worst field. No one wants to be a waiter. Well, that's essentially what you're doing, and it's difficult. And that's because I love bodybuilding, I love bodybuilders, but we're the most self-centered, egotistical, whiny, people that we just are. And the sport kind of fuels that, I mean, dieting for competition, you have to be the most narcissistic, obsessed, because every minute of every day is devoted to, I have to do these things for me or I will not be as good as I could be. And so as a coach, it can be difficult because you're dealing with the people like that who get kind of so lost in that world of, me, which they have to, because if you're to get to the conditioning and the things that need to be done to step on a bodybuilding stage or physique stage or classic, any of those, you have to be, and completely self-obsessed. And it can be difficult to understand that your coach is, he needs to be an extension of you, but he's not you. So it can be difficult for them to understand that one, they're not my only client, and two, I'm not dieting for a competition. This is not my whole world. So you have to have really thick skin with that. And then obviously, really probably the knowledge of nutrition is probably only about 50-50 of it. But you have to have that. And you can get pretty far as a coach with mediocre knowledge. And I think that's why there's thousands of coaches, but there's only a handful of really high level coaches. I mean, the same coaches are basically turn people pro. There's 20 of us who consistently turn people pro every year or consistently move people up weight classes, where there's thousands of coaches.
Right. Now, for you, was there anybody just maybe that you actually worked with, or maybe that you've just kind of seen from afar over the years within the industry in terms of a coach? Is there anybody that you kind of looked up to in the past, or is there maybe a coach that you respect or look up to presently? And I know John Meadows recently passed away, and I'm sure he had a huge impact on your life. So maybe it was John, maybe it's somebody else, but I would just kind of love to hear maybe any coach or coaches that have mentored you or had an impact in terms of your coaching and even your life.
I'll start with John. John's kind of interesting because I had already been a coach for almost a decade before he really kind of came on the scene. And by that point, I had gone back to grad school. And so I was kind of like fading out of coaching. I wasn't putting much time into that while he was really growing. So he didn't have the role, I guess, as a mentor in that sense. But I don't think there's anyone probably who's done more for the job of coaching than him. I mean, it was when I first started doing it in like the early 2000s, there was, Chad Nichols, Milos, and Chris Aceto. That was it. I mean, there might have been a few, but there was no, there weren't local coaches. If you weren't top 10 at the Olympia, pretty much, even then, like even at my level, which at that time was very low, you were only coaching people for national level shows. People didn't hire a coach to do a state level show. And so I don't think this really exploded into the full industry it is until John started coming out and then doing the Mountain Dog and just kind of really exploding and kind of becoming ubiquitous in the whole industry. And so then I think every coach owes him a gratitude for. There's literally probably thousands of people who have a career that they would not have if it weren't for John. Now, as far as coaching, I've always deeply respected Chad Nichols for how he brings people in peaking for competition, which is a difficult thing to do. And I think more importantly, it's difficult to do with large male bodybuilders. I don't think people realize the difference. Bringing in a super heavyweight on point peaked is a whole different world than bringing a smaller competitor or a female competitor in. Smaller competitors, when they don't have muscle, it's simple. You dehydrate them and that's it. They can't go flat, they don't have muscle. When you're working with a 300-pound male bodybuilder, I mean, the swings of they can go from looking, 15th place to Mr. Olympia in hours. And I think, and then Chad, who is also doing that while being known for relatively, I don't want to say extreme, but intense protocols, to do that and consistently peak people, I always thought was very impressive. Chris Aceto was probably who I most looked up to as a coach. He was, the late 90s, early 2000s. It was basically him and Chad, Milos a little bit, but Chris I always really liked. I didn't know him, and I don't think I still don't know if I've ever actually met him in person. I've met everyone else, but I always really respected just the way his clients talked about him. Like, he talked with Jay, it was almost like he was talking with a friend, and I'm sure they did become friends. And then just so I don't forget, there's two other people kind of in the industry, more loosely related to bodybuilding. One's Dr. Trudell. I always liked his, just the way he brought kind of what I always thought was the best approach. I don't want to say I thought even, his is an entirely unique approach, but just the general idea of what builds muscle. Well, we need to get bigger and stronger, and where you really weren't. And actually, I bring this up every time, but Dante and I actually kind of got off on the wrong foot. I think it's the thread, the Cycles for Pennies thread. This is, maybe 2003 or something. He was explaining kind of that what the beginnings of DC trading, and people were just, giving him crap about it and not agreeing with it. So I posted in support of him, and I was like, guys, it's not rocket science. He's saying, get stronger, eat more food, build more muscle. It's simple. And he took that as me saying, oh, that's too simple. So he DM'd me, and I was like, no, I worded it wrong. I'm on your side. It's like, how can we argue this? If you take the way, and obviously there's more adaptations, there's sarcoplasmic adaptations and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you take a guy who's eating 2,000 calories and you can get him eating 4,000 calories, provided he doesn't get fat, and you make him twice as strong, there's no way he's not a bigger human. If you're eating twice as much food and twice as strong, you're a more muscular human. And then, as far as, again, to go back, because the business portion of it is always important to me, because hardly any of us are going to have careers as competitors in the sport, but a lot of us can have business careers in the sport. It would be Dave Tate, the owner of Elite FTS, who I think has a really interesting business mind as far as how to. He's got a slightly different view on just about everything than most people do, and it's always an interesting view.
Great. Now, what would you say, or do you kind of have, just very basically and generally, do you kind of have like your own philosophy when it comes to, let's just specifically a focus on nutrition with your clients? I know there's always the individualization, but there's always got to be a starting point as well with everybody, right? So would you say that you kind of have your own, or have created or adopted like your own philosophy, like when it comes to nutrition, or how would you kind of take that?
Yeah, I do. And I think, like, everyone's got their own spin on it, but I think the nice thing about nutrition is it's bound entirely by thermodynamics. There's a lot to learn, but it's really, there isn't very much. And at the end of the day, I say this, we say we're a closed thermodynamic system. Humans are really an open thermodynamic system, because there is some matter transfer when we breathe and stuff. But as far as nutrition's involved, it's a closed system. There's energy comes in, the calories you eat, and if either you burn that energy off, or some of that energy stays on the body. And that energy can stay in the body in three ways. It can stay as fat, it can stay as glycogen, or it can stay as muscle. And that's it. And so that's all you're doing. There's three types of calories. We bring them in, and when I say calories, it's really three types of energy. We bring them in, and we burn most of it off. If we burn more than we eat, then we lose some of that energy in the body. And in that case, we're trying to maximize the amount of energy that's from fat for that. If we eat more than we burn, then we keep some of that energy in the body, and we try to maximize the percentage of that's muscle or glycogen. That's it. And that's really it. And you have to understand macronutrients, and you have to understand but there's nothing magic. There's no mysticism. That's it. It's just like fueling your car. If you can imagine, there were 3 types of gasoline you could put in your car. All you're doing is you put 20 gallons in and you burn 20 gallons. If you burn 21 gallons, you're dead on the side of the road. You've lost, that's it. If you burn 20 gallons, you have some energy still in the tank. And so like the general philosophy is I use carb cycling, and I say carb cycling, but it's really calorie cycling. I cycle all the macronutrients. And basically, if I could boil it down, there's when you're dieting, you're trying to be hypercaloric throughout the week, meaning you eat less calories than you burn. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to reduce carbohydrates initially, because they're just an easy, quick burning calorie source. And you typically want to keep protein a little higher, because protein has a higher thermal effect of digestion, meaning like 15 to 30% of the protein you eat actually gets burned, because protein isn't really used as a direct energy source. So, and I'll try to be not too long on this, but people get protein way wrong. If you're eating 500 grams of protein a day, that's a pound of protein per day. Right? Yeah, half a kilogram. So, a little over a pound of amino acids per day. If you were using those amino acids to build muscle proteins, you would be gaining a pound of muscle every day. So we're not using hardly, and if you boil it down, we're using at most about 25 grams of that 500 grams to actually build muscle. So the rest of it, what does it do? It goes through other energy pathways. It gets broken down through gluconeogenesis to create glucose, which we then use for energy. If that doesn't get used for energy, it goes through the fatty acid synthesis process, which then gets converted to fat. If that doesn't get used for energy, then it gets stored as fat. That's it. So that's one of the reasons why protein should be higher in a diet, because it takes energy to digest it, basically. And so I do that. And then the reason carb cycling is because you deplete all these energy stores in the body. One of the stores you deplete is glycogen. And eventually when glycogen gets so low, you just kind of increase the likelihood that you'll burn muscle for energy. And so if one day a week we take carbohydrates really, really high, when we're glycogen depleted, we can actually eat more calories than we burn. And those calories will be stored. Like we talk calories in versus calories out, those calories are stored. But if they come from carbohydrates and we're carbohydrate depleted or glycogen depleted, then those extra calories are stored as glycogen rather than fat. So it's a way for us to, while dieting, eat more calories than we burn on one particular day, but not gain any fat from it. And that kind of keeps metabolism high, keeps thyroid production good. And then that glycogen can then be used as kind of like a fail-safe energy source to prevent muscle loss throughout the rest of the week. Now, my approach with off-season is super, super, super simple. It's basically a 2-step process. I don't try to add weight. All my clients add size, and if I feel there's anything I'm good at as a coach, it's adding muscular body weight to competitors. But I don't try to push the weight up. What we try to do is 2 things. Step 1 is we try to teach the body to eat more and more good, clean food without getting fat. And that's the important thing, without getting fat. And then phase 2 is in the gym, you basically just try to get stronger. And I say stronger, not meaning just move more weight by getting more biomechanically advantageous or by using tighter knee wraps or things like that, but actually making the muscle stronger. And it boils down to, if you're like we talked about before, if you're eating more food than you've ever eaten, not gaining fat and getting strong as hell in the gym, you're going to get bigger. And so those are my 2 approaches, basically.
Excellent. Now, I saw something on your Instagram. It might have been a little bit further back of a post, but I saw something in terms of blood work through your website. So just touch on, just quickly, if you don't mind, Justin, like what is the important for, fitness athletes, bodybuilders, kind of everybody underneath that umbrella? How important is the regular blood work, and then being able to have somebody that actually knows how to interpret it and read it, have that person in your corner?
It's so important, and it really sucks that if you take the type of person who's obsessed enough to do what it takes to be successful in bodybuilding, is that same type of person who doesn't want to know what they're doing wrong to the body. It's kind of bury your head in the sand, and it's much better than it used to be with blood work, but it's still, I think people have this idea that they're going to get blood work, find out something's wrong, and then have to quit bodybuilding. And so they do, but that's not the case at all. If you find out these things are wrong, you don't have to quit bodybuilding. You can continue on. You just have to be smarter about it, or you have to do, it's super simple thing. It's like, oh, my kidneys aren't doing as well. Why? Oh, my blood pressure's high. Treat the blood pressure. Kidney function no longer decreases, or my liver's ruined. Okay, that's a simple thing. Let's remove whatever oral products we're doing that are killing your liver. The liver is incredibly resilient. It'll bounce right back as long as you're not stupid about it. Oh, my red blood cell count is sky high. Well, let me give blood or let me do something to mitigate that. It's not, people who look at it as a death sentence, where it's the opposite. It's a life sentence. You can, and if you look, none of the, I mean, Ronnie Coleman's pretty messed up, but those are bone issues. None of the greatest bodybuilders of all time are dead. It's all these idiot local guys dying left and right, and so you can do bodybuilding at the extreme. I mean, look at Jay Cutler. He looks like he's 32 years old. He's almost 50. You can do bodybuilding at the extreme levels as long as you're smart about it. And so it's astounding to me that people don't get their blood work looked at. And part of it is because doctors are assholes about it, and they don't want to they don't want to put any nuance into it. They just want to say, oh, blood work's not good. These things you're doing are bad. Stop doing these things. And so the bodybuilder is saying, I'm not going to stop doing these things. But the doctor says, I told him to stop again. Stop. There's nothing benefits. So I'm partnering with this company called Evolve, and you can go to my website, troponinnutrition.com. You can get blood work. You can get hormone replacement, testosterone replacement, peptides. You can get everything prescribed through a physician through Evolve, through my website. And it's all virtual. You don't ever have to travel anywhere. You don't have to go into a doctor's office. It's all done from the comfort of your home, and you can get your blood work actually analyzed properly. And the other frustrating thing is, when I say like nutrition only has a couple of levels of complexity, blood work is simple. There's like 50 things, that's basically yes or no. If you can learn the times tables, you can read blood work. There's only, you got to work out red blood cell, you got to watch out for your liver enzymes, your lipid levels, your kidney function, and some hormone levels. That's like 5 things. That's typically about 5 things. You have to understand like how creatine kinase plays into things, but there's only a handful of things you need to know anything about to keep your competitors healthy and safe, or keep yourself safe. And so that's always been a long time frustration for me, which is why I'm really happy to finally have the option available on my site. And it's not even something I benefit tremendously from. I don't own Evolve. I could start a company like that and profit much more, but obviously everyone wants to make money, but this is something I don't even care if you go through my website. You can find Evolve directly. You can go to Walk-In Labs or directlabs.com, but get your blood work. It's not a death sentence. It's the opposite. Knowing your blood work and keeping it good is going to let you continue bodybuilding before you have kidney failure.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up the conversation here. Justin, one last thing I do want to come back to that we touched on in the beginning, or you brought up with Jay Cutler, kind of the business side of fitness, or the business side of bodybuilding. You said it earlier, and I thought it was a great point. Like, people that compete in bodybuilding and fitness, they put so much into it, but then it doesn't always or often translate into other aspects of their life, including business. So just touch on the importance of a fitness competitor or a bodybuilder, somebody in the industry that's competing, really focusing and thinking about the business side of things, because the competing eventually is going to end for everybody, right? Talking about Jay Cutler, it ended for him. So just touch on the business. How can somebody take what they've learned within bodybuilding or fitness and apply it in other aspects of their life, specifically business?
Yeah, first of all, there's so much money in the sport. The fitness industry in general is so much larger than it used to be. Like I said, I'm not even old. I could still be competing in bodybuilding. And even when not even when I was a kid, but even when I was in high school, like I talked about, there were still coaches who were kind of against weightlifting. And even then we had almost no information. The industry is enormous. There's billions. There's at least 1 billion people probably globally who spend some money, time, effort each year on fitness. I'm sure at least. There's probably not an adult in America, And so there's so much money in the sport. It's so widespread. When I was in high school, there was like me and my buddy Mike who worked out. That was it. No one lifted weights. Now every high school kid wants to get jacked. And so, and the other benefit is most of the things we do is high revenue percentage. It's not like, like equipment sales or something, or home building, where you got to build $1 million home to make $70,000 as a general contractor or something. We're talking, an ebook for $79. You get 100 people buying your ebook every month. You got $8,000 a month income. That's 100. Who doesn't have 100 followers? It's astounding to me. I mean, I'll reap the benefits from it for the people who aren't, because it's more, I guess, money in my pocket. But the sport is so large that it's almost an infinite seed. The more people can jump in, it's just astounding to me that, you know, with the coaching prices, you know, if you people, you know, if you, some coaches charge $500 a month, you know, you get 100 clients. So like there's a hard limit. And some of these coaches, I see the client, I know they're not giving, you know, true value to your client. But if you take 10 minutes to check an email, which if you type fast and you're good at what you're doing, you can do a check-in for 10 minutes. You do 100 clients, that's, you're looking at usually about 30% of your client total is how many emails you can expect a day on average. So that's 30 emails a day. At 10 minutes an email, that's 300 minutes. Was that 4 hours? So that's, you know, and some of these coaches charging $500 a month, you know, for 100 clients, that's $50,000 a month for 4 hours of work a day. You know, you know, and obviously you need to be good at what you're doing, but that's at the high level. You know, if you don't know any idea what you're doing, and you charge $50 a month, and you get 100 local, you know, 100 local high school kids, you know, that's $5,000 a month. You got a $60,000 a year job working 4 hours a day. If you're not even good at what you do, you know. And so there's, you know, and then in between like the YouTube stuff, the, you know, selling stuff on Instagram, the, you know, Twitch, you know, there's just so many avenues that, and there's just every young kid, every male from 18 to 25 at some point in that time frame gets into working out. I mean, probably 85% of them. And females, I mean, it's astounding to me there aren't more. And females spend money. The men are always trying to skimp out on money. Men are always cheap. Females are willing, because they're used to paying too much for hair products, and they're willing to spend money. And so the fact that there aren't more female focused, all these female competitors who know what they're doing, how they're not coaching, how they're not selling ebooks is astounding to me, because there is 100 million, you know, 18 to 55-year-old women out there who want to look better, want to feel better, want to be healthier, and don't know how to go about doing it. And it's astounding to me that more people aren't branching into that.
So just quickly, if somebody that's younger, that's listening to us, maybe they're a current competitor, what would you suggest for them to do, kind of like just like 1 or 2 action steps to kind of move in that direction in terms of business while they're competing, or business involved in fitness?
Anything you learn, try to teach it. If you learn something, try to write it down as though you're writing the book to teach it. And that does 2 things. If you, and everyone's been in class, you take like in physics and math especially, you're sitting in a physics class or a math class, and the teacher solves the problem on the board and it makes perfect sense. And you're like, oh yeah, obviously, you know, of course gravity's pulling down, that makes sense. And then you go back and try to solve the problem yourself, and it's like, what the hell is he writing? None of this works anymore. There's a huge difference between understanding when someone else tells you how to do something and being able to explain how to do that same thing to someone else. So when you learn something, the next step is write it down. And that does 2 things. One, it actually teaches you what you know and what you don't know. Because if you don't know it, your brain can't mentally gloss over while the professor writes it down. You have to figure it out. And the other thing is, you've now written it down. It's there forever. Eventually that can turn into a book, which then you write the book once. Like I wrote Comprehensive Performance Nutrition in 2008. It still sells, you know, it still sells daily. You know, it's work I haven't done in almost 15 years, and you know, it's there forever. It's written down, and then it's even for you to reference. You know, because I'll go back through and someone will mention something from a book, and I'm like, yeah, I totally forgot about. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, it's like, and it brings you back these things that you kind of used to utilize. And so that's what I would say. Just put some time and effort into it. If you learn something, pretend you're teaching it to someone, and then write it down as though you are writing the book. And that, 1, you'll know it for the rest of your life once you've been able to explain it. And then 2, it's there for the rest of your life that you can then use later on for business purposes.
That valuable advice. Thank you, Justin. All right, we had an awesome conversation. Is there any last words that you want to share? If so, please do so. If not, where can people reach out to you? I know you're connected with Hostile, so if you want to maybe give a shout out to them or anybody else at this time, please feel free, Justin.
Yeah, definitely. I love Hostile. I've known Fuad since he was an amateur. We met on Muscle Mayhem back in like 2002, 2003. So I've known him since before either of us. I don't know if either of us had even competed when we first met. So like it was, you know, we saw each other kind of come up in the sport, and then, you know, I stopped here. He kept going all the way up. And it's really cool to see what he's done with the business, because I think he's got he's got his finger on the pulse really well. Like even the funny things like, you know, team spoon, team fork, all the little things the bodybuilders kind of talk about. It's cool to see because most of these supplement companies are owned by, a lot of them were bodybuilders, but they, you know, they weren't really in the industry. They were, you know, more business-minded people. And so they're great as products, but they come from that pure business mindset where I think Hostle's the only one right now where it's like, you know, for bodybuilders by bodybuilders, you know, you feel like you're home, and they produce products with that same mindset, you know, like their intro, I'm kind of picky about this, and that even if I were with a company, if I didn't like all their products, I wouldn't recommend the products I don't like. But they are all my clients by default. I don't force them to get it, you know, but I say, I tell them from our inter workouts, I recommend their inter workout, and if they don't get their inter workout, I recommend them buying those exact ingredients separately because it is a very solid product. Same with their pre-workouts. Yeah, so the Hostle's a great company. You can't go wrong with them. You can use my code Harris10, all capital letters if you want. You don't have to. If you want a discount, you can get it. As far as for me, you can find me at troponinnutrition.com. Terrible name, hard to remember. Troponin is actually the cardiac marker for a heart attack, which it's a long story how that came up. I just happened 20 years ago. The two names I was using on all the forums were troponin or tropomyosin, just because I thought they're part of a muscular contraction, which I thought was cool. But then, you know, when I started a business, I didn't know what to name it. I was like, well, everyone knows me as Troponin. Anyways, or you can search Justin Harris Nutrition, Justin Harris Carb Cycling. You can find me on Instagram, you know, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. I don't do a ton on social media. I built my business is, you know, I've been around almost 20 years. The word of mouth is strong enough where I'm always pretty loaded with clients. I don't ever need to advertise or put much effort into it. And then if someone's interested in working with me, I'll work with anyone. If I have spots available, I'll work with anyone who's motivated to work hard. I don't care. I'll take the high level clients, but I almost prefer the opposite. I think if there's anything I'm really proud of in my coaching career, is that there's a whole slew of now high level competitors whose first coach was me when they were starting out. And I love far more taking the guy who's never competed and then seeing him, you know, get first call outs at the nationals than taking a guy who's been top 3 at the nationals 5 times and is just looking for the edge to finally turn pro. So if you're wondering whether I'll work with you or not, if you're motivated to work hard and I have spots available, I'll work with you.
Excellent. Justin, thank you so much for taking some time out of your full schedule to chop it up with me. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much. This is great. Appreciate it.
Cool. All right, listeners, once again, thank you so much for listening to Behind the Muscle podcast. If you guys would do a huge favor and please subscribe to the podcast, leave a written comment and review. And then the biggest thing for me is that you would just take this episode. Justin dropped a lot of great information and shared a lot of his personal experience with you guys. If you guys would take this episode and share it on your social media platforms, I would love that. That's how more people find the podcast. That's how more people listen, people learn, and people get positively impacted. And finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.